Good day, everyone. I'm Rich Chester. I'm the Director of Consulting for LPA Systems, and I'm pleased to be with you today to talk to you about what's new in the IBM Cognos release 10.2.2 that became generally available on November 21st. Throughout the webinar, if you have questions, please use your chat window to submit them. Hopefully I'll have some time for questions at the end, and I'll answer as many as I can at that time. If we run out of time and I haven't gotten to all the questions, never fear. We'll collect up all the questions at the end of the webinar. I will answer them all, and we'll email you back the answers to your questions. So please just go ahead and use that chat window as we go, and you'll be able to get your questions answered for sure. Also, I want to remind you that this is a new webinar in a whole series of webinars that we've been doing over the past couple of years. And all of our webinars are recorded, and you can get access to all of our recorded webinars by going to www.lpa.com/resources, and you can download any of our previous recordings. Before we get into the content about what's new in 10.2.2, for those of you who are new to our webinar series, I want to spend 3 minutes and give you an idea of who LPA is and what we do. LPA Systems was founded in 2001. We're based in Rochester, New York, although we have offices in Dallas, Houston, as well as sales representatives who cover the entire spectrum of the United States and Canada. We have hundreds of active clients. They range from Fortune 100 companies all the way through to the mid-market, as well as clients who embed IBM Cognos into their own software applications that they sell to their clients, which we refer to as our OEM clients. We are an IBM Premier Business Partner. That is the highest level of business partner status that you can have in IBM. And we cover the entire spectrum of the business analytics and information management and financial performance management on products that IBM offers. We are also an Esri Silver Tier Partner. Esri is a leader in the world of spatial software, and there is an Esri Maps for IBM Cognos product that we implement that connects IBM Cognos content with Esri Maps to enable spatial analytics that go well beyond the out-of-the-box mapping capabilities that are baked into the Cognos product. And also, we are predictive analytics experts using the IBM SPSS software suite. As far as our consultants, most of our consultants average over 10 years of experience. All of our consultants are certified. Most have 2 or more certifications. As I said, our expertise spans from data warehousing through the business intelligence and visualization components all the way up to predictive analytics with financial performance management, budgeting, and forecasting using TM1 in between. In 2013, IBM selected LPA's Healthcare Analytics application as one of 3 finalists for their Beacon Award. The Beacon Award is awarded to those software companies like LPA who IBM has judged has created an application that is world-class. So we're very, very proud of that distinction. As far as our offerings go, we can come in anywhere on the curve that you are riding. So if you have yet to start your business analytics journey, we can help you with some services around readiness, strategy, and roadmap services. We can talk to you about migrating, let's say, your existing reporting solutions, and we can help you build a business case to get into this world of business analytics and move forward. We are experts at data warehousing. We do architecture, design, and implementation, full development lifecycle of data warehouses, including big data. We move into visualization, reporting, analytics with the Business Intelligence Suite from Cognos. We can come in and look at your current Cognos environment and do a health check to help you get the most value out of your BI investment. We can migrate you from release to release. We do a lot of SDK development, especially for those OEM clients I mentioned earlier. We're experts in security. And we also have training offerings where we will present training on the different authoring tools and Cognos Workspace, that Report Studio, Cognos Workspace Advanced, and so on. And we'll customize those to use your data. In the performance management world, we implement TM1 for planning and budgeting. There we have a very similar set of offerings in terms of health check to ensure you're getting the most bang out of your TM1 buck. We'll do migration and updates, and we also have training facilities there. And as you move into the advanced world where you get into predictive and spatial, LPA is your go-to partner for both of those as well. Now, we are offering to those organizations that qualify a no-cost, rough order of magnitude estimate for a 10.2 upgrade for your business intelligence environment. We'll give you a work breakdown structure. We'll give you a notion of what you might have to remediate in terms of what typically does or does not migrate without issue. We'll take a look at how you're licensed, and we'll look at the new capabilities in 10.2.2 and how they map to licenses and give you a recommendation if you want to use those capabilities, how your licenses may need to be enhanced. We will help you summarize the benefits of upgrading so that you can get funding as appropriate for the upgrade project. We'll also look at training for your organization, and ultimately we'll present you with an upgrade proposal that you might choose to go forward with. If you're interested in this assessment and receiving the information that I just described, you can send an email to sales@lpa.com, or you can call the 866 number on your screen, and we'll be happy to respond. As I said before, we do these webinars on a periodic basis, and you can get all of our replays off of our resources portion of our website. Here are some upcoming webinars. On December 11th, we'll be presenting the Cognos 10.2.2 Dynamic Cubes. That's what's new in Dynamic Cubes in 10.2.2. On December 18th, we'll be looking at specifically text analytics, which is part of the predictive analytics spectrum. On January 8th, we will do an encore of this particular webinar, and so on. So you can always look at what our upcoming webinars are by going to the calendar on our website. You can also register there, and we hope that you will continue to find these webinars valuable as we go forward. Also, if you have ideas for webinars you'd like to see, please submit those in the chat window as well, because we would love to be able to do webinars that we know we have an interest in our audience. So today's agenda about what's new in 10.2.2. We'll talk about some general updates. Then we'll get into some enhancements to Cognos Workspace, followed by Workspace Advanced. We'll talk about Report Studio, and then we're going to call out some specific enhancements in Report Studio around active reports. The Excel output changes and the visualization changes actually apply to both CWA and Report Studio. We'll talk about enhancements to dynamic cubes, and again, this is going to be broad brush today, and we're going to actually do demos of some of those enhancements at that What's New in Dynamic Cubes webinar coming up on the 11th. We'll talk about multi-tenant changes and changes to dynamic query mode, and finally a new capability called personal data sets. A lot to get through today, so hopefully we'll still have time for questions at the end. So right away into the general changes. First of all, in previous releases, they changed a lot of icons in Cognos Connection and in Cognos Workspace. So they finished that job, and they've updated the icons in Report Studio and Cognos Workspace Advanced. So you'll immediately notice that there's a slightly different look and feel. Most of the icons are very similar, so they'll be easy to figure out, but they are definitely different. A number of folks have asked in the past, is there a way for the communication between Cognos and my content store database to be run over SSL? And the answer heretofore has been no. That is now enabled in 10.2.2, so you can enable secure communication between IBM Cognos and the content store notification databases, the logging databases, if you're using those, and so on. Heretofore, when you've installed Cognos, the default application tier has been running on the Apache Tomcat um, application environment. It is now replaced by an IBM application environment called WebSphere Liberty Profile. So Tomcat is not installed, Liberty Profile is installed. They both use the same port number, which is 9300 by default. Of course, you can change those port numbers. All of that configuration that you're used to will still work. It's just that the application server is no longer Tomcat. It's WebSphere Liberty Profile. Administrators can now restrict the ability of users to run reports in particular outputs. This way, if you have had trouble in the past with people inadvertently running, let's say, an Excel 2002 format, you could turn that off. If you don't want people to do outputs into 20,000 page PDFs, you could turn that off. And that's all done through role and group security that we're used to. If you are a Windows environment organization and you install the 64-bit Windows version of Cognos, on that setup, there is a notion now of a quick setup option. And what this does is it installs an instance of DB2. It populates your Cognos configuration, including the connection to DB2. Within that DB2 database, it configures one of these new personal data set databases, which we'll get to in a little bit of detail later. And then it starts all services. So this is sort of an auto installer that includes all of the Cognos components, the content store database management system, and then instantiates the database for your content store as well as for one of these personal data sets, all as one activity. Cognos Mobile, by the way, is now part of the standard install kit because I went looking for the separate install when I went out on the 21st to download all of the install kits and couldn't find it, thought it was delayed. Turns out it's not delayed. It's embedded in the standard server install kit now, so you don't need to download a separate mobile install kit. And there were no enhancements to Query Studio, Event Studio, or Analysis Studio in this release. Certainly, every release Cognos puts out includes bug fixes, and there were some bug fixes along the lines that went across the entire spectrum of products. However, in terms of enhancements only, no Query Studio, Event Studio, or Analysis Studio enhancements happen to be in this release. Moving into Cognos Workspace, a few enhancements there. Probably the most significant is the ability to create a report and then convert it to a widget all in one process just using Workspace. So typically before this release, what you would do is you would author a report that included a crosstab or a chart or a visualization that you wanted it to use in Cognos Workspace as a widget. And that was the only way you could get a new widget into Cognos Workspace with content from a package, was to have somebody author a report from that package, and then you would use that report to source your widget. This enhancement allows you to right-click on a package in Workspace and build a report. I've got another slide on that in a second. There's a new filter widget called a button filter that I'll show you a picture of in another slide. And then there's this notion of master filtering, where I can actually use a widget in the Workspace to filter other widgets. So I can make a widget, let's say it's a list that shows year down as a column. And I can say, make this widget a master filter. Click on a year like 2010, and then all of the other widgets on the tab that I'm on that have year in them will filter to 2010. So it makes a widget a filter, which is a very like an active report kind of interaction, but now it's done through Workspace. And then there's a filter orientation property that's been added to the filter, so you can express whether you'd like your filters to be oriented horizontally or vertically when they're presented. So this create a new report within Workspace. The notion is when in the navigator, you find a package, and the picture I found Go Sales Query. You right-click on it, and you click on Insert in Current Tab or Insert in Global Area As, and you'll get the option for a navigator, or this new option, New Report. Now, when you click New Report, it's going to launch Cognos Workspace Advanced. And it's going to give you all the power of Cognos Workspace Advanced to create a report. But it doesn't allow you to save that report to public folders or my folders. When you save that report, it actually saves it as a new widget in the Workspace that you are creating or editing, right? So in this way, you don't separately author a report, then open Workspace, navigate to the report, and drag in the report to be a widget. Here, all in one simple step, you right-click on a package, create the widget you're looking for, and save it to your workspace. In terms of this button filter, so in the top picture, you see that, in addition to my select value filter and my slider filter tools, I now have a new tool called a button filter. When I drag a button filter on, it gives me a wizard and it shows me the available columns, just like the other two filters do. But when I pick a column, and in my example here, I picked product line, what you'll get is a button per value of the column you pick. So there happen to be 5 product lines in the database, so I get a button labeled for each product line. And when I click on one of those buttons, for the widgets that are listening to that filter, it will filter those widgets to the selected items in the button. So yet another way to present a filter in a Cognos workspace. And then that master filters notion. So here's another example. I've got a cross tab. And in that cross tab, I have years across the top. I have product lines and types down the side. And on the action bar for the widget, there is now a new master filter button. That's what's outlined in red there. When you click that button, what it does is it makes this widget act as a filter. So what I did after clicking that button is I clicked the 2010 in my left-hand widget. My right-hand widget is a cross tab that also had years across the top, but you see it's only showing the 2010, the match to the button I clicked in the left-hand widget. So this makes my left-hand widget a filter for all of the widgets that have the same column in them that corresponds to the one I clicked on. If I had clicked on camping equipment, the right-hand widget would have done nothing because product line is not part of that widget, you see. So just like a slider filter or a button filter or a value filter in Workspace works, where the widgets with corresponding columns will filter when you use those filters, a master filter widget works in the same way. Widgets with corresponding columns will filter based on what you select in that widget. Now moving on to Cognos Workspace Advanced. The enhancements to Workspace Advanced within the tool itself in terms of authoring reports, actually there were only a couple, and they also happened to cross over into Report Studio. They have to do with Excel output and with visualizations. So I'm not going to talk about those until I talk about Report Studio. Instead, there's an enhancement around Workspace Advanced that is unique to Workspace Advanced that I'm going to talk about here. And that's this notion of a customized user interface. So if you are a Cognos administrator, you're familiar with the fact that in the Security tab, there are 2 Report Studio interfaces expressed there. There is a professional user interface and an express user interface. And those interfaces control what you see when you run Report Studio, which is the professional interface, and what you see when you run Workspace Advanced, which is this express interface. If you choose to, and this is not something you have to do, this is something you could optionally configure. If you choose to do this optional configuration, you can take and create a new tab under Library, which will remove the interface tab under Security. And it will copy those 2 interfaces, the Report Studio interface and the CWA interface there. But now what you can do is you can start with those interfaces and you can craft a custom interface by turning on and off features. So in the picture I show you the copy commands. So here's the Library tab, the User Interface Profiles section, and there's the Report Studio and the CWA interfaces there, and those are sort of anchor interfaces. You can select one of them. I happen to select CWA, and you click on Copy. And what you do then is you give it a name, and then you turn on and off features. So if you're familiar with the Cognos Workspace Advanced interface, you'll know that layout calculations are not part of the default interface. If you want to create a custom interface for, let's say, some more advanced users in your organization, where you turn on layout calculation capability, you could do that, and then you can assign security to that interface that matches that user community that you'd like to have use that interface, and then they would be able to write reports with CWA using layout calculations in addition to all of the other features. Similarly, if you wanted people to launch Cognos Workspace Advanced and have virtually everything that was available to Report Studio in that user interface, except, let's suppose, conditional formatting, you could copy the Report Studio interface definition, turn off the conditional formatting features, and assign security to that interface, to that group of users that you want to give almost but not everything in Report Studio when they author. And again, this is all done when you launch Cognos Workspace Advanced. When there's multiple profiles available to a user, they'll be asked, hey, which profile do you want to use? From that, they'll be able to go. If you have one profile, it doesn't ask you, it just launches that profile. If you have multiple profiles, it asks you which profile to launch at that time, and you can set a default profile if you choose to in that launch window. Moving on to Report Studio and what the changes are there. In both CWA and Report Studio, on the splash screen, you'll note a new button called New from Template. The Create New and Open Existing buttons have always been there. The New from Template is new. You could always have created reports from templates in those tools. It's just that it was not as clean and obvious how you did that as it is now with this new button. There are a couple of new buttons on the Explorer bar in Report Studio that I'll show you in a separate picture. There is this notion now of reusing classes. So in the Page Explorer, there's a class component. In there, a lot of you, I'm sure, are using classes within a report to control look and feel globally within the report. So you might change column heading, fonts and background colors and so on for list reports. You might have a default margin or padding on certain objects, but you use classes so that every object in the work area that has the same class will get that same feature. This way you can make global changes to all the lists or all the crosstabs or all the charts in a report rather than doing it on a object by object basis. Well, sometimes you have to do that in every report because you're going for that common look and feel. Well, now you have a way to write it in one report, update the classes in that report, and then actually reference those classes in other reports. So a little bit more on that in a second. And then tab reports running in HTML. So multi-page reports can be expressed as tabs when you run that report in HTML. So let's take a look at some of these features. So the first one are the new buttons on the Explorer bar. So you have page design and page structure buttons on the Explorer bar. You used to be able to go right to page design or page to structure under the view menu up at the top of your screen, but now they've made it even easier by putting those buttons so you can toggle between them on the Explorer bar. Now let's get into this report styles thing. So again, class changes can be done on a report by report basis, and these classes are essentially a cascading style sheet that's managed centrally on the server. And I bet a number of you have gone to the server and you've updated the cascading style sheet to make global changes to the default classes, and therefore you've gotten a look and feel for your company. And there's been a couple of downsides to that. For those of you who have done it, you know these. When you install a new release, you have to re-edit the style sheet, right? Because when you install a new release, you overwrite that information, right? You get a new style sheet and you have to go and customize it again. Also, it only gives you one global look and feel. But a number of folks need a different look and feel for different constituencies in their organization. Maybe you need a look and feel by customer, especially if you're an OEM client, you might see this. Maybe you need a look and feel by department. And so this edit the master copy on the server, and of course if you have a multi-server environment, you had to edit the master copy on all the servers and keep them in sync. And then restart Cognos. It's not an ideal situation for making these changes. So Cognos has introduced this notion of, all right, create a report. In that report, update global classes or create local classes. And then in all the reports you write that you want to have that look and feel, go to the Tools menu and reference this report. Let's call it the style report. And then you can leverage the classes, both the global class changes as well as any local classes you've created in those reports. If you use layout component references, I like to think of this as a layout component reference for a class. As you know, with layout component references, there's an inheritance thing that goes on. So let me explain that. So I've done, to get this screenshot, I did tool style references. And so here's where I tell it, go to this report and get the classes that I want to use for this report. So that's how I reference my class report. If I need a different look and feel per department, I'll have a class report that has the look and feel changes in it for each department. I'll pick the one I want for the report I'm authoring. And I can also indicate which styles I'd like to use, color and background, font, border, and so on. And then here's the inheritance piece. When would I refresh this new report having changed the style report? So let's suppose that I've got a style report where I've got green backgrounds on list headers. And we decide that we want to change that from green backgrounds to blue backgrounds, that's a change I'd like to make. In the reports that I've written that reference the style report where I've just changed it from green to blue, if I have runtime as the refresh, as soon as I run them the next time, they'll update immediately to blue. I haven't got to edit those reports or anything. That change in the style report automatically gets inherited by all of the reports referencing it when those individual reports are set to runtime refresh. However, there may be cases where I want to actually go in and edit the reports. So the class change should not auto-propagate, but should only propagate when I edit a report and go into Tools, Styles, References, and click the Refresh Now button. I have both options. The default option is to be automatic. So this way I can create, through Report Studio interface, a collection of class definitions. I haven't got to edit things on the server. When I upgrade the server, I don't have to re-edit those things, right, because they're all contained in a report, which means I don't even need server access to do this global look and feel change. With this enhancement, I think it's a great enhancement. Tabbed reports in HTML, those of you on 10.2.1, if you upgraded to FixPack 4, you can actually do this now. This enhancement was actually released early in a FixPack. It's also part of the 10.2.2 install. Under report properties, which is file report properties to get there in Report Studio, you have this option called View Pages as Tabs. It's defaults to no on a report-by-report basis. You can set it to yes, and the options are to say yes and display the tabs at the top of the screen, or yes and display the tabs at the bottom of the screen. But the notion here is that if I have a multi-page report, it used to be I'd have to page down to go from page definition to page definition. But now it'll express each page as a tab. The name of the tab will be the name of the page. So you're going to have to change the names from page 1, page 2, page 3 when you create your pages to something meaningful. But they'll display as tabs, and then my users don't have to page down to get to the page they want to get to. They can just click the tab to get to the page they want to get to. Again, that's report by report. And if you've got 10.2.1 with FixPack 4 installed, you have this capability now. Now, active reports are a subset, if you will, of the reports that you can write with Report Studio. And there's a few changes to the active reports that are interesting as well. There's a preview option in your active report world. And that is so that you can author active reports and without having to run them as a separate task, see what your look and feel looks like and actually test your interactions. All within the Report Studio interface without having to run. So run, tweak, run, tweak, run, tweak. That's gone now. Now you go to preview mode, preview, tweak, and the preview immediately changes. You can run active reports now in either HTML format or in the MHT downloaded format, which means now you can run active reports in browsers that don't support MHT, which is a great enhancement. You can convert an active report to a template, which is not something you could do before. And there's a property change on the slider tool that now lets you set your sliders to express either horizontally or vertically. So this preview option, it's another button on the Explorer bar. So you see on the bottom screen, there's a third button now that's new. The top two are page design and page structure. The bottom one only shows up when you're doing active reports, and it's the active reports preview button. Okay. And when you're in preview mode, there are when you're in the preview view, there are two modes. The first mode is edit. Edit mode is the default. When you click the preview button, you drop into the preview in edit mode. And in there, you see how the report will render but it's not active. It's not, you can't click on things and have it affect other things, right? So all of those linkages between objects, they're not running in edit mode. Instead, when you click on an object, you get a property sheet up for that object, and you can immediately make changes to that object. And if you make a formatting change, you'll see it immediately in preview mode. Non-formatting changes, you can click a refresh button and you can see those in preview mode. So in this way, you can tweak and immediately see the results of your property sheet changes in preview mode without having to run the report each time and wait for that run to execute in order to make your tweak. So it should really make active report writing much more efficient. The other mode in the preview view is called preview mode. And here, you're not updating the property sheet anymore. Here, you're actually testing your interactions. Click here, does it filter that widget? Click on this one, does it select that deck, and so on. And again, you can update your interactions in the preview mode and immediately see those interaction changes. And then finally, in this preview view, there's a couple of drop downs that let you express the preview in different screen sizes. So there's a drop down for an iPad, there's a drop down for an iPhone, there's a drop down for an Android, there's a drop down for standard PC screen densities. And then this way, you can see how your active report will render on multiple screens right here in Report Studio. And there's also a drop down so you can express your screen as either in portrait or landscape mode. So this should make authoring your active reports far more efficient, and then also testing them across multiple platforms in terms of how they look far more easy, because now you don't have to download them to those platforms to see them before you can tweak them. You can actually see what they'll look like here and adjust them accordingly. Now across all of the tools, when you express your output in Excel 2007, if you set an advanced property in the report and batch report services, you could tell Cognos when there is a page break defined in the report, label the tabs in Excel the value of the page break. So in my example here, I wrote a report and I told Cognos to page break on product line. And then I set this RSVP property, and when I run the report to Excel 2007 output, it will express the report a tab per page. But how are the pages defined? Not as page 1, page 2 in the Page Explorer. This is one page of output, but I'm doing a control break on product line, and therefore I will get the product line name as the label for the tab in Excel. Now, again, visualizations are common to both CWA and Report Studio, and there's been a number of enhancements to the visualizations world. You still go to the analyticszone.com, so www.analyticszone.com, to download these. Now, though, be very careful when you download from there that you pick the right version for your visualizations. You don't want to download 10.2.2 visualizations to run on a 10.2.1, and you can still download your 10.2.1 visualizations. And there's also a visualization customizer tool, and you can download that from there as well. Again, make sure you download the proper version. Now, what are the enhancements in 10.2.2? Well, used to be before 10.2.2, when you put a visualization in your report and you didn't fill in all of the category drop zones, the visualization wouldn't render. So if your visualization required 3 categories, you had to fill in something in all 3 categories or you did not get any output. Now, you can fill in any number of the categories and it will render appropriately even with missing categories. So that's a great enhancement. When you have a visualization in your report, let's suppose you grabbed a packed bubble, popped it in your report, populated it, but you decided that actually a tree diagram would have been a better choice. Used to be you had to delete it, add the tree diagram, and start over. Now what you can do is you can right-click on that visualization that you don't want and select an option that will let you pick a different visualization. And then Cognos will put in the new visualization, and it'll transfer as many of the properties you'd already set, including the items in your drop zones, to the new visualization. You've always been able to do this with a chart, right? You could convert a bar chart to a pie chart, and Cognos would do its best to transfer the properties that you had set in the column chart onto the pie chart. Well, now it does the very same kind of thing, only with visualizations. Now, prior to this release, you might have a packed bubble visualization, and maybe it had bubbles that were variants of blue. And what you really wish you had was a packed bubble chart with bubbles who actually used green colors or orange colors. So what you would have to do is you would download the visualization customizer, open up the packed bubbles chart that was set to blue, set the colors using the customizer to green, save it under a new name, upload that to your library, and now you'd have two packed bubble charts. You'd have a packed bubble chart that you could add that was blue and a packed bubble chart that you could add as was green. And you get the idea. If I wanted a red one now, I would have to customize one and make it red. And so I might have, a number of the same visualization, the only difference in them being what colors they're using when they display. And that's because there was no way to set those kinds of properties, color and a bunch of other ones in terms of appearance, because they weren't available to me as properties in Report Studio. Well, with this release, they are. So there's a new set of commands in the viz.json language that the new customizer supports that will let you set up a collection of properties for look and feel that include things like colors and size. And therefore, now I can have one packed bubble chart and I can set the colors I want right within my Report Studio report. So a lot like the properties that we have in the charts tool. So the notion here is that you have to add these properties to the visualizations. So there are 15 visualizations last time I looked up on analyticszone.com that I could download from the 10.2.2 collection of visualizations that include these properties, so you could immediately download those. The 10.2.1 visualizations absolutely still run in 10.2.2. So when you upgrade reports that contain those visualizations, not to worry, they'll continue to work. It's just you won't have those new properties. So you still have to use the green one when you want the green bubbles and the blue one when you want the blue bubbles. If you want to use the new properties, you've got to download visualizations that have the new properties defined in them, or download the new customizer and update the ones you created and add those new properties to those. And then finally, there's a new type of visualization, and that's a map visualization. So, and in those 15 that I said, visualizations that you can download, 2 of those happen to be examples of maps. So in addition to the bubbles and the boxes and the bars and the pies, there's now maps available to you to download and also to create custom visualizations from. A lot of enhancements to dynamic cubes. I'm going to run through them quickly here, but there's going to be a webinar coming up where we'll go into them in more depth. But there's actually 2 full pages of them. Very quickly, you can leverage your Framework Manager packages to design your cubes now, which was not something you could do heretofore. So if you've got a DMR package, you've already got your dimensions and facts defined, you can right-click on them and import those into your cube model. And so they make a very quick starting point for designing your dynamic cube. You can add parameter maps to your dynamic cubes now. You can define in-memory aggregates in Cube Designer, and Cognos has not only let you define them, but they're also automatically improved and optimized based on how your customers run a report. So in-memory aggregates, in-database aggregates have existed in prior releases, but they were essentially static. In-memory aggregates were always the result of a recommendation from the Dynamic Query Analyzer tool, and they were based on what your users had done in the past, but they didn't change as your user behavior changed automatically. Now the in-memory aggregates actually change dynamically as your user profile changes in terms of how people use your cubes. So that's an exciting improvement. Overall memory utilization has been improved, especially the member cache. The number of bytes per member now is down to 550. It was a higher number before. Also, the query service now will recognize when the Java virtual machine memory is nearly full, and it's going to try to release resources, so it'll avoid those out-of-memory exceptions that sometimes get in the way. Always been a sort of a mystery as to how big my server should be to host a particular dynamic cube. And now if you right-click on a cube in the Cube Designer, there's actually a little wizard where you can specify the number of members in the cube, the number of users who will use the cube, and it will present with you to you the number of cores and the amount of memory that you should have on a server that hosts this cube. And then if you want to host 12 cubes on that server, you just add those numbers together from the calculator across the cubes you'd like to host, and that'll tell you the size of the machine you need to host your dynamic cube library. There's a command line tool now to do a number of the administration things like starting a cube and stopping a cube, so you could actually do those from an external process as opposed to having to log into Cognos and do those through the Cognos administration. Dynamic cubes now support named sets. So named sets allow me to do something like this. Let's suppose I have a set of regions, and within my region members I have a Northern Europe, a Central Europe, and a Southern Europe member, and what I want to do is combine the data for those three into a member called Europes. So now I can define a named set called Europes, whose membership are those three members from my region dimension, and then I can use those name sets across reports without having to define that name set within each report. Heretofore, if you change the relational data that sourced your cube throughout the day, Cognos didn't necessarily pick up those changes unless you stopped the cube and restarted the cube, and then it would pick up all of those changes. Now there's support for incrementally updating a cube so that you can come to a nearly real-time updates of your fact data without having to stop and restart your cube. And of course, stopping and restarting your cube takes it out of service, and anyone who tried to run a report during that period couldn't. So this allows you to keep the cube up all day long, but still refresh it with updates to your fact tables. Going on, you got packages for more than one cube now. So there's actually a way to define a package, and you can tell you can take cubes in the model and add them to the package, so when you publish this package, it can contain more than one cube. Heretofore, each package from the dynamic cube modeling tool had to be specific to one cube and only one cube. Now I can define packages with multiple cubes in them. There's a couple of new properties out there. One of them is to trigger a report after the dynamic cube starts so that you can pre-cache certain things. There was one property that did that. Now there are two properties that will help you in terms of pre-caching. I mentioned this on the other slide, but I'll say it again. In the Cube Designer now, I can describe in-memory aggregates that I want, that I know I'm going to need, that I don't want to instantiate in the database. I want instantiated in memory. Heretofore, the Dynamic Query Analyzer had to recommend in-memory aggregates. I had no way to really define them as the cube modeler. Now I can define them in my cube model. I still have to use the Dynamic Query Analyzer to instantiate them. But at least now I can say, I want this in-memory aggregate and define it right in Cube Designer. Bunch of improvements to relative time so that your ability to create quarter to date, last year, rolling 7-month totals and that sort of thing have been added to the Cube Designer. And it will try to actually use, as this final one, when it recommends an in-database aggregate, this means the Dynamic Query Analyzer. When you run DQA and it recommends an in-database aggregate, it'll actually be smart enough to say, oh, look, you've got these other aggregate tables out there, and it would be more efficient to create this new aggregate from the existing aggregates than always creating it from the lowest level fact table. So in this way, you'll get more efficient creation of database aggregates. So when it creates the DDL for you and says, here's the DDL for this new aggregate, it may actually use one of the existing aggregates already. We have a webinar on these where I'll actually do demonstrations of some of this stuff on Thursday, December 11th. You can register for that at lpa.com/events. If December 11th has come and gone, you can watch a replay of it at lpa.com/resources. Moving on to multi-tenancy, a number of changes there. Heretofore, there was no such notion as a tenant administrator. If you needed to administer content, you had to be a system administrator. There was no way to say, look, I'm going to partition some of those system administrator tasks and give them to people in my tenant community and limit what they can do. That concept didn't exist. Now it does. So there's a new role that you could add users groups to give a set of users this tenant administrator set of capabilities. There's two types of tenant administrator, bounded and unbounded. There's a new property in Cognos configuration where you could specify when a user logs in something called a bounding set, which allows you to specify a list of tenants that users from that part of your authentication source would have access to. So you can do this tenant bounding. That is, let's say that you have a user, Rich Chester, who when he logs in, he's a member of the tenant administrators group, and his bounding set has T1 and T2 as the tenant IDs he can manage. And those are the only two tenants he could manage in a bounded tenant administrator function. If you had 5 other tenants, Rich Chester with only T1 and T2, he can only manage those 2 tenants. Or you could have unbounded administrators where you do not configure this tenant bounding set notion, and then Rich Chester, who's a member of this tenant administrator role, will now be able to administer all tenants. So that's one big change. The other big change is that you can share content across more than one tenant. So in previous releases, when you established ownership of content for a tenant, like T1, when you set the property for the tenant to T1, only members of that tenant could see that content. The other option you had was to set no tenant on content, and that made that content public. Everybody could see it. So you had public content, and you had content owned by one and only one tenant. Well, now what Cognos has done is they've introduced this concept called a virtual tenant, where in the multi-tenant tab, I can create a virtual tenant and express a membership. T1 and T3 are members of this virtual tenant. And when I apply the virtual tenant to an object, all users who are part of tenants 1 and 3 could then see that object. So now I have fully public, everybody can see it, private, only one tenant can see it, and something in between where I can share content between a subset of all of my tenants using this notion of a virtual tenant. What can tenant administrators do? They can manage security, jobs, schedules, and so on. They can impersonate the tenants. They can search those tenant content. It depends on the bounding set, whether they are limited to particular tenants or whether they can do this across all tenants. But regardless of whether they're bounded or unbounded, they can never access the multi-tenancy tab. They cannot disable a tenant or delete one or create a new one. They can't change tenant profiles. They can't terminate the sessions of a tenant. They can't do server administration tasks, right, that go well beyond what they would do up above in terms of what they can do for tenants. So it's not giving away all of the administrator features, it's just giving away some. Okay, and in terms of the sharing of content, this virtual tenants. So in my picture here, I'm on the multi-tenancy tab, and I created I clicked on the Create New Tenant button, and in it I was able to specify that I'm creating a virtual tenant, and here you'll see my members for my virtual tenant are T1 and T2, and so now I have the option of applying this virtual tenant ID to objects and sharing those between tenants 1 and 2 as opposed to any other tenants I might have, as opposed to making it public for everybody. I'm going to have to use a naming convention here. There's no icon difference between a virtual tenant and a regular tenant. So you're going to want to do some kind of a naming convention, maybe prefix it with virtual. That way when you sort, they all sort together, or suffix it or something. But now you've got this intermediate thing. It's not one tenant or everybody. You've got the ability to do a subset of tenants. Enhancements to dynamic query mode. A lot of these enhancements manifest in Framework Manager. There's the notion of a bridge table that links star schemas that don't have a direct relationship between them via a conformed dimension. There's this notion of a summary query, which is a property change on a query that when you express measures from this query on a report, they're always total. They're always aggregated. I say totaled, and that's actually not correct. It's actually going to use whatever setting you have to aggregate. So you might set the aggregate to average, you might set the average to min, you might set the aggregate to max, you might set the aggregate total. But whatever you set that aggregate to, when you add these items to your report, they'll aggregate automatically for you without having to put complex logic into every report to do those aggregates. There's a notion of join optimization in Framework Manager, and this is with one-to-manys. You can do this in Report Studio now, but with this release, it's been propagated to Framework Manager, so you can manage that centrally. And for those folks out there still using Power Cubes and Transformer, packages and reports written with dynamic query mode can now be used to source Transformer cubes. Heretofore you had to use only CQM packages and reports. Now you can also use DQM packages and reports. Now this notion of a bridge table goes like this. I've got 2 stars and they do not have a common dimension between them. And yet I'd like to drop data from both of those fact tables onto the same report. So what I do is I build a bridge table. And a lot of us already have these bridge tables over there, but there was no way to have Cognos recognize that this bridge table was specifically for me to combine 2 stars. With this new usage property, and again, only in the DQM world, this won't work in CQM, I can specify that a particular query subject is a bridge query subject. There's some information here on the slide about how the bridge table will restrict data when you filter. The bridge table relationship is always a mandatory relationship. An example might be of owners and an owner fact, properties and a property fact, and one or more owners own a property. One or more properties can be owned by different owners, right? So there's a many-to-many relationship. I have a bridge table between them. This enhancement allows me to identify that bridge table and have Cognos write sensible, meaningful SQL to combine the data from those 2 stars, despite the fact that there is no conform dimension. Summary query is, again, a new DQM usage property. And the query items will already be summarized when you drop them on a report. You don't have to repeat the summarization formulas and calcs from report to report to report. You just tell Cognos this is a summary query subject, and it will auto-summarize all of those items that you put on your report. And this notion of filter join optimization, this is one-to-many. So when you do one-to-many joins, the one side and the many side really are not used to try to optimize each other. So what Cognos will do in DQM, if you tell it to, is it'll say, all right, let me filter the one side and get a subset. Let me use the result of my one side and filter my many side, then do the join. And that way I will join fewer records and therefore have a speedier result. So I can tell Cognos to actually take and build an in clause on my many side that is includes the values of my one side. I can also tell it not to use that method, but to use a temporary table method in order to do it. So there's actually 3 settings there. But the notion here is that if I filter the many side with the results of my one side before I do the join, I can get anywhere from 10 to 100 times faster join performance on my one-to-many joins. So that's a pretty cool enhancement. And then the last enhancement we'll talk about before we get to a couple of questions is this new notion called a personal data set. So a lot of us are familiar with external data, and the external data notion is I can add a spreadsheet to an existing package through this external data wizard. And the spreadsheet is still maintained on my PC. It's not copied to the Cognos server. It's not maintained by Cognos in any database there. Instead, it is linked to a package. And whenever I run a report, it's going to ask me where to find this spreadsheet on my PC. Personal data sets, on the other hand, allow me to upload my spreadsheet or my CSV file and store it in a DB2 database on the Cognos server. On any DB2 database. Doesn't have to be physically resident on the Cognos server, but I must have created a My Datasets repository data source in Cognos administration pointing to this DB2 database. And now I've got this data stored centrally as opposed to on my PC. I can update it as needed, right? I have the ability to re-upload if I've made changes. But the thing is, the data is now maintained centrally, not on my PC. So unlike external data, right, it's not living on my PC, it's maintained centrally. I create a package for that data set, and I write reports against that data set. and then I can share that package with people if I want to share my data with people. So I can control the security on the package and the public folders, and if I want to give access to my data to my buddy Matt, I would just give the security change on the package so that Matt had access to the package. Bang, he gets access to the data that I've stored in my datasets repository. Don't have to, could keep it all private, but I also have the ability to share it simply by configuring my package. Okay, so lots and lots of enhancements in Cognos 10.2.2. I'm sure you have just a ton of questions. Yes, I see that you do. So let me get through as many as I can. Looks like I only have a couple of minutes. But again, rest assured that we'll respond to any questions that you've submitted this way via email after the fact. So here we go. Will a DB2 content store be part of an option on AIX? So the quick setup feature that I was talking about earlier, that where it will installs a DB2, it configures and auto starts your Cognos, that is strictly Windows. And not only strictly Windows, but strictly Windows 64-bit. So no, that's not available on AIX. Let's see. Can I install 10.2.2 over 10.2.1, or does it need to be a fresh install? All right, so the rule of thumb goes like this. If one of the first three numbers in the release changes, it's a new install. If the fourth number changes, it's an overlay. Fourth number changes are always fixed patch. So technically the current release before 10.2.2.0 was 10.2.1.5 because the latest fixed patch was fixed patch 5. Whenever that last number changes, that's an overlay. That's not a new installation. When any of the first three numbers change, like with 10.2.2, that's a new install. So that's your rule of thumb. So this is definitely a new install. How well does 10.2.2 work in Chrome? It works actually pretty good. I was testing Chrome, as it turns out, earlier this week. I authored a Report Studio report using Chrome without any issue. I ran an active report using Chrome, and Chrome doesn't have MHT support, but I ran an active report in HTML mode in Chrome, and that worked just fine. I didn't do, let's say, extensive testing in Chrome, but I did enough to convince me that the Chrome support is real. It is critical, though, that you use the version of Chrome that Cognos says is supported. Right? Don't use an earlier one, don't use a later one. So make sure you turn off your auto updates. Cognos says, look, we've tested it on this version, and unless they make substantial changes, it'll work on future versions. That's always in that supported environments website. But I find that the browser companies do make enough changes where Cognos is not necessarily guaranteed to work on future releases. So I always try to stick with the release that's explicitly stated in the supported documents. And I think I have one more question here. Time for it, yeah. So dynamic cubes using packages. Can I also use transformer models to define a dynamic cube? No, I'm afraid not, at least not yet. So while my framework manager package and my DMR and my relational in it can be used to quick start a dynamic cube, my transformer models and those cubes cannot be directly converted model to model in the dynamic cubes world. All right, I'm getting the high sign that I am out of time. I really appreciate your attendance today. We will get to any questions that you have left. Also remember, submit any notions that you have for new webinars that you'd like to see via the chat window. And if there's any topics in 10.2.2 that you wish we could have done a deep dive on, submit those in the comments as well. And that'll help us craft some new webinars as we go into 2015. Thank you very much, everyone.